Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Today we are talking about the embedded capacity register. I will just go through the agenda for today. So I'll be doing a welcome to explain who was going to be running the presentation today and just go through a little bit of the housekeeping. And then I will hand over to Ian Povey, who will give us an introduction into the ECR, the Embedded Capacity Register, where he'll be talking a little bit about some of the history and the content that's available. We will then hand over to Lois Clark, who is going to do a demonstration of the Embedded Capacity Register. And at that point, we'll be able to take any sort of quick questions in terms of if you want to see any specific details within the Embedded Capacity Register. Lois will then continue adding a little bit of context in terms of how the register fits in with our network investment. And then at the end, we shall also have an opportunity for any questions and answers. The presentation should take around about 45 minutes. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Ian.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ian Povey. I'm the Strategic Planning Manager for Electricity North West. What I want to do first really is set a little bit of the scene, the background to the Embedded Capacity Register. You're all probably aware that the UK is the first major economy in the world to commit to pass laws to end its contribution to global warming by 2050. The electricity sector has a large part to play in achieving this end game, and that really is the background to what the reason for the Embedded Capacity Register. The changing energy landscape, what's going to happen? Well, we see that already. We've seen that a lot more generation is connecting to our network. When hitherto it was all connected to the transmission system, it's now connected to the distribution system. And what else is going to happen? Well, we foresee that there's going to be a move away from petrol-driven cars onto electric vehicles, possibly hydrogen too, but certainly electric vehicles. We're already starting to see that that market starting to grow. Similarly, heating our homes, again, the biggest player in town at the moment is gas central heating, but we're starting to see a move towards electric heating through heat pumps and direct electric heating. So what does all this mean for the electricity system? It means really we're foreseeing a doubling demand over the period to achieve zero carbon. We're perceived that we're going to see a doubling in demand for electricity. So what will that do? More demand on the network means, well, we're going to have to cope with that demand. And how do we do that? Well, traditionally, we've done it through reinforcing the network. That is costly, and it also is very disruptive in terms of digging up roads. And if you think of a doubling of demand, that's a lot of roads to be dug up and a lot of money to be spent. So it's incumbent upon all the electricity operators to try and manage this increase in demand. What we need to be able to do is give visibility of how people can connect and contribute flexible services to our requirements. If you move on a slide, please, Hannah. Oh, data is key, the title. And that's very true. This aligns with the work that was done by the Energy Data Task Force. Not sure if you're aware of that. That was a government phase and Ofgem piece of work. It was led by Emily and Laura Sandys, and they came up with 5 recommendations about data. And the main one that I want to draw your attention to is the one that says that all data should be open and easily accessible by third parties. The Open Networks project is a project that all the DNOs and National Grid and people from outside of the UK industry, at least, so we've got people from Ireland contributing to say, how are we going to move forward to zero carbon and the contribution of the electricity system? And again, data is critical to making sure that people can participate in the market. So it's transparency of that data, visibility of the data, and accessibility of that data. And we're committed to playing our part in that. Anna, if you would move on a slide, please. So the embedded capacity register is one of the first steps that all the DNOs have taken to provide visibility of what is connected to our network. So it started out as an open networks project where we developed what we call the system-wide resource register. And the aims of that register was to let people know what's connected already and what your ability was to be able to make connections yourself or contribute to a flexible market requirement from the DNOs. Subsequent to that work, and latterly in parallel, the BEIS panel of technical experts identified that there was actually not enough information out there on what's connecting to distribution networks for the capacity market to operate efficiently. So they looked at what we've done in the system-wide resource register and augmented that with extra information that would aid the capacity market and its efficient operation. And that's now where we've established the embedded capacity register rather than the system-wide resource register. And as you can see from the slide, the date was we published our system-wide resource register in January of this year, and very recently, July, it's been updated to the embedded capacity register. That was following the approval of the DCUSA change proposal 350. So the DCUSA is the distribution, connection, and use of system agreement that all DNOs and all connected parties must abide by, and in that we're now mandated to produce this embedded capacity register. And this embedded capacity register will publish data on all distributed energy resource connected to our network. So that could be generators, it could be storage devices, it could be anything really. And it's limited to, at the moment anyway, to distributed energy resource with a capacity of over 1 megawatt. But going forward, it's perceived that we may go down to much lower values than 1 megawatt. I think the 30 kilowatts is a figure that's been quoted, mainly because at 30 kilowatts you have to be half-hourly metered. So once we do that, then what you'll see is a much larger register. And there are different projects on the go at the moment that are looking at how we can provide that data in an efficient way. And as you can see on the far right there, when it says the future, it references to projects. And the Flex R project is one that all the DNOs are undertaking with Alexon, and seeing how we can come together and maybe provide as a one-stop shop for the UK, all the embedded DER that that is above 30 kilowatts. But as I say, that's for the future. There's also the MEDA project, which is an Innovate UK government-sponsored project that is on the go at the moment. That is looking in a similar area. So it's a moving feast that but that's very much for the future. Final slide from me, Hannah. So what is in the embedded capacity register? And I've already alluded to the fact, really, it's all connected generation and flexibility providers, which could be storage, it could be demand customers who have agreed to flex their demand requirements to help the network out in periods of high demand. You know, the demand side management, basically. So anyone who's got a contract for that, anyone who's a connected generator, anyone who's a connected storage device will be on this register. But it's not just those who are connected now, it's those that we've accepted to connect as well, so that people are aware of what capacity may have been on our network, may have been used up by these people. And this is something that in Electricity Northwest we're particularly pleased about. We've also included all the planned reinforcements that are happening on the HV network, the EHV network, and the 132 kV network. I say we're proud of that. Other DNOs have only published reinforcements associated with generation or storage. We, on the other hand, have said no. We're going to tell you about everything that we plan to do. So our embedded capacity register includes all planned reinforcements. I think that concludes what I had to say, and we pass you over to Lois now to give you a bit of a demonstration.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me. My name's Lois Clark. I'm the Flexibility Solutions Manager at Electricity Northwest, and I've responsibility of uploading and completing the embedded capacity register. So I'll just take you through the document quickly. So within the introduction, we've got definitions of what all of the different columns are. So it might be worth having a look through that, you know, at your leisure, just so you get to understand what the options are and what the differences are, because this can help to influence what you might want to filter on within the columns. So at the end of the day, the ECR is just a large spreadsheet, so it is quite useful for if you need to find any information. But I would recommend looking through this so that you know what you'd like to look for in the first instance. But we've got full definitions of what everything is within here, so I do recommend you take a look at that if you'd like to clarify any points first. So the ECR itself, so we've got plenty of columns along here, and each row is representative of a site. So that could be an accepted site or a connected site. So as you scroll across, you can see there's an awful lot of information. The first kind of 5 to 10 columns are all about geographic location. So we have address, town, counties, and then we also have coordinates. Then where some sites have multiple technologies installed at the one site, then these can be shown in some of the other columns. So we have a primary resource type, and then a few columns later you then have a secondary or a tertiary resource type, so you can see what different components make up that site. So I was just going to show you 3 different kind of ways in which you could use the register today. So the first one would be by filtering to customer name. So I can see we've got quite a few developers or operators that have signed on to this webinar today. So you can select your customer name or developer name, however you'd like to refer to it. So you can select one, and then from that you can then view all of the applications that are then either accepted to connect or already connected and operated by that person. So for example, I'll choose this. So we can see we've got 26 sites here by United Utilities. I've just chosen them so we've got a lot of generation connected. I thought it was good to have a large example. So you can then view customer sites, and then if we scroll across, you can then filter onto where they're connected within the region, the resource type, and the size of the installation. So as Ian mentioned, the ECR is currently only used for over 1 megawatt. So if it's under a megawatt, unfortunately we won't have it on the register yet, but there is scope in the future. It then details the type of connection and then whether it is accepted or connected. So for example, if you wanted to check how some of the sites that are owned or operated by yourselves were being represented, then you can filter to yourself and then go to accepted or connected to view the status, and also to ensure that the installed capacities and import-export capacities are logged correctly as well. So another helpful thing you can do in here is to view whether there is any reinforcement related to a connection. So let me just remove some filters here. So as Ian mentioned, we've published all of our reinforcement, so I'll head to that tab in a minute, but where it's specifically, where a connection is relating to some reinforcement, so that work needs to be completed prior to the customer being able to connect. We've included references within here, so you could say there's these 3 schemes were waiting for one reinforcement scheme to be completed before they could connect. So can then nip over to our reinforcements tab, so we can say that 33 kV switchboard change at Werneth Primary. So those 3 sites are waiting for that to be completed. So that work has now been completed, but the connections are still in the process of energisation. So we still keep it on there to show what that connection queue would have been like in terms of accessing that capacity. Another way that you can use the register, which can be quite helpful, is in conjunction with our heat map. So this is for anyone that is wanting to connect onto the network. So you might have used the heat map tool as well to identify your local primaries, so you know where you'd like to connect, and then seeing what the different options are. So for example, you could select in Ancoats, so very busy in the centre of Manchester at the moment, and then you can view the different connections that something that's already connected or accepted to, so that you get an idea of how much capacity is there, or if you've seen that there's only 1 megawatt of spare capacity on the heat map, you can then use this to then look up what is already connected there or accepted to help understand what the picture is within that environment. So I think the tools are helpful when used in conjunction with one another, because they do help to paint a bigger picture. So I'll just drop down now to our reinforcements tab. So as Ian mentioned, we've decided to publish our entire reinforcement programme above HV. So you can see here from the reinforcement driver, so some of them are connections driven, and then so that's the kind of top 12 or 13, and then the rest is the rest of our general reinforcement programme. So we've detailed whether it's short circuit uprating, so whether that's a fault level issue, or thermal or voltage related. And then within the works description as well, we've tried to identify, it's a bit more description as to what it is. So HV fault level reinforcement, for example, and the names. So these all describe the substation names. So again, if you did want to look at any of that additional information, perhaps on the heat map or the long-term development statement, then these names are all the same throughout all of our documents to help you locate them. So we also have the DNO services tab. So we currently have one flexibility provider, which is providing services within the Penwortham East GSP group. So that's a contract for 3 megawatts until 2023. So when we do get some additional flexible services, those will be added onto here as well. And you can find a link within the register on the right at the other end of the spreadsheet. So I'll save you the journey on that one. But we've got links through to all of them, so you can detail what's connected where and what services they're providing. So that was a bit of a quick run through. I think it's probably useful if everyone, we all have different reasons for wanting to look at this information. So I do again recommend going through the introduction and looking at the definitions of all the different columns to help identify what you would like to see and how to get there as easy as possible, really.
So there is a link here which will take you to the part of the website where you can access the embedded capacity register. So that is available, but it just takes you to a place where you can download the spreadsheet that Lois has just been going through. I shall move on to the next slide, Lois.
Yeah. So I wanted to cover how we use this information. So in terms of compiling the embedded capacity register, this is taken from our internal systems. So this is our understanding of what is connected where. So it feeds into a number of different systems we have. So it goes into our billing and contractual communications. So in terms of what we understand, how much you have connected, so it would be that the type of technology, the installed capacity, or your contractual value. So you might have an import capacity or export capacity set up, and that's what you'll then build for as part of a monthly bill. But more importantly now, as we're transitioning into our new network management system, this information then as a database feeds through into that system. So in the event of a network abnormality, then the system will be talking to this to know how to react based on what is connected where. So it's extremely important that we do have the correct information to make sure that you are or your assets are operated accordingly. So we also use this for network modelling for future connections and investments. So in order to know what you need to do, you need to know what you already have, don't you? So this looks at the type of technology and capacity at each different location on the network, where we can then assess our options of how to, provide more capacity where and what different options are available. So as I say, the register is a reflection of the information that we have within all those systems. So at the moment, in terms of our network investment process, we forecast what we expect the demand to be on the network and the generation based on the information captured within databases such as these and the number of new connections that we have. So this is then modelled and overlaid on top of all of the demand and generation data that we already have, so historically from the last few years, to then forecast where we might be having some issues in the future. So where we do identify a constraint, then we will first assess that to decide whether it is suitable for flexible services or not, because only some types of constraints can be alleviated by these. And then if not, we will come up with a reinforcement scheme in order to overcome this. So if we nip on to the next one, I'll just go into a bit more detail on these. So in terms of our demand forecast, we had a Network Innovation Allowance funded project called Atlas back in 2014-15. So this helped us identify 5 different scenarios, which then helps us inform our investment decisions, because we can view the potential view of the world within these 5 different scenarios to make sure that it makes sense in as many of them as possible, really. So we do this work on a yearly basis, and we work with Element Energy, and we've now started producing our DFES document, which also has some regional insights and a new workbook that's also available on the website. So with Element Energy, we make forecasts based on the demand that we have already experienced on the network, potential uptakes of low carbon technologies within the region. Everything's weather corrected using all the previous demand data, and then all of these connections that you see as accepted on the ECR, those are then overlaid with it to paint, a potential view of the world based on these. So if we nip on to the next one. So this describes what our forecasts are. So as I say, we've got 5. So Central Outlook is our main one, which is formulated from a set of average assumptions. But the other 4, so Active Economy, Green Ambition, they describe different economic and social conditions and different uptakes of low carbon technologies. So in our DFES document, these are then shown in lots of different formats to say what might happen in different regions within Electricity North West, and what those what the level of reinforcement might have to be in order to accommodate these. So if we pop on to the next one. So in terms of our reinforcement drivers, there are 4 that will influence, how we will invest into the network. So annual review is the main one. So once we've done all of this forecasting work, we'll then also create our load index report, which I'll touch on in a moment. And this assigns a value to each asset, so be it a primary, BSP or GSP, from 1 to 5, which then describes how heavily loaded they are. So that brings out the majority of our reinforcement schemes. Otherwise, we have strategic reviews and network referrals. So that comes from, do we have pockets of investment that are cropping up around the region? So we may build an asset there because we know that it's a site of strategic investment. So get things ready for when people are going to connect. Or the last one for connections driven. So that's when we are required to reinforce an asset specifically because a customer wants to connect in that area. So on the ECR, you can see the difference between them. So that's just called general reinforcement, which covers the first 3 there, or connections driven reinforcement, where the specific scheme has triggered us to do that. Pop on to the next one, please. So our load index report, so you can see bits of this as well. So some of this information is available within our long-term development statement, which identifies what the load index or LI references for each site. So it's an obligation under our regulator Ofgem that we have to produce on an annual basis. So our demand is essentially measured against capacity, and an assessment is done for each site in order to allocate the correct value. So once it hits 100% loading, it's an LI4. And then if it's at 100% for over 9 hours, then it becomes an LI5. So once you get to a 4 or 5, we are triggered into acting. So we will need to invest in the network in some way to alleviate that, because that is a non-compliance on our part. So you can view all of these on our long-term development statement as well, which help to paint a picture of the overall health of the network and the loading. If you nip on to the next one. So once we've identified a solution, then we will use our real options cost benefit analysis model in order to determine what the best solution is for that. So you can use this to compare flexible services against multiple different asset solutions as well. So it might be to build a new primary, could be to put in the same size transformers, larger transformers, different cables in the ground. So this tool was developed as part of an innovation funding incentive with academics from the University of Manchester back in 2016. So it's based on the Ofgem cost benefit analysis model, which looks at depreciation of assets and initial investment and rate of return. Whereas what additional factors we've included are the ones on the far left and far right. So we've got network losses and demand forecasts. So again, it's bringing all of this information that we have on current reinforcements and forecasted reinforcement based on the level of connections that we have, to then determine what is the best investment solution for the site in question. So there's a lot of work going on with this at the moment across the industry in terms of whole system CBAs, but also with flexibility, with developing a new common evaluation methodology tool, so that all DNOs start to look at these issues in the same way and undertake the same kind of assessments. So again, there's a lot of convergence across the networks at the moment, and we're hoping to help drive this a bit more, especially with the additional work that we've had within this space already. If we nip on to the next. So as I've mentioned through here, some really useful sources of information that I recommend using in conjunction with the embedded capacity register are these 4. So we'll send you over the slides, and there's links embedded within here. But the long-term development statement is updated on an annual basis and then some of the data tables are then done in May as well. So this includes 8 different data tables. So you can look at circuit data, transformers, fault level, distribution substation, and it's if you love a good spreadsheet, it's the one for you. It's got plenty of information within there, and you can use it as a bit of a tracker, if you like, to find your way around some of the issues if you do come across any. Our heat map tool as well, especially if you're wanting to connect. So this is you can have it in spreadsheet or in map format, and by clicking on the asset or identifying the nearest assets to you, it will then show you what available capacity there is in that region. So you can it's modelled based on connections each month. So the same data goes into the heat map tool as it does into the embedded capacity register, because it's accepted connections refreshed on a monthly basis. So if anything new has been accepted, it will show up on the ECR as a, one of the most recent acceptances, but it will also show up in terms of less capacity that is now available within the heat map tool. So it's helpful to try and make that link and take a bit of a story, if you like, for that site. Our DFES document as well. So that's distribution future electricity scenarios. So those are all of our forecasts and insights, and now we have the new workbook. So again, you can choose which asset you'd like to look for, and we're currently working on that. So that will be published in the autumn. So I recommend keeping an eye out for that latest information. And then flexible services. So I am the Flexibility Solutions Manager, so I'm biased. I did have to mention it. So this details any new requirements where we do have them available on the network. So at the moment, we publish our requirements in autumn and in spring of each year. So in September, I would keep your eyes out, or you can sign up to our distribution list to be notified as soon as they are available. So we'll publish them on the website and also on Piclo as well, detailing all of the requirements that we have, how much capacity and what times of years and when we would need them by. So that's for sites where we've identified that we already have a constraint, but instead we're looking for more innovative ways to do this. So as you can see, all the data that we've published in the ECR is linked into a whole world of data that we have going on within Electricity North West at the moment, and we're always looking for more. So in terms of some FAQs here, these are just some bits that we've thought of internally that we get a lot of questions about. But also, if we've got a section for questions in a few minutes' time, if you have any others. So this register will be updated on the 10th working day of each month. So it's been the 14th for the last 2 months. So in terms of reporting data as incorrect, you can do that by emailing us at flexiblecontracts@ENWL. So if you are doing this on behalf of someone else, then you will need to provide a letter of authority, etc., to prove that you are at liberty to make those changes. But then we would gladly update things for you. We're aware that a lot of the time, especially with generators, assets can change hands or have new operators, or equipment could be updated and us not necessarily notified. But we really would, I don't care how many emails we get, we'd love to know if anything has changed. So everyone can access this information via our website. So I'm sure you'll all be rushing to the website afterwards to go and check it out yourselves. In terms of data privacy issues, so we have redacted information in line with GDPR requirements. So any assets that within our database we know to be owned by an individual party, we have then redacted that so it's classed as data not available. So where some sites may have changed hands and this there may be a new owner, then if you, for example, you were to report it and say, no, I was the owner, but it was some personal information, then we would still keep that as redacted. As Ian mentioned beforehand, the register, they are looking to extend this to less than a megawatt, so going down to 30 kilowatts and above, or CT metered sites. So we're not sure exactly when this is going to happen at the moment, but there are lots of discussions on it. But the ECR, as I said, the first issue was only in July, so I think we've still got several months, hopefully, before another update. And then what's it, second to last? So all DNO's information be published in the same place. So this is what some of these projects Ian mentioned earlier will be looking at. So we're looking at systems and platforms that will be able to extract this data from multiple different organisations' websites so that you can then access them in one place. But in the meantime, all DNOs are currently publishing these and we're all using the same template. So as a benefit to anyone using any software that's extracting these, then it's just a note of guidance that all columns are in the same place, all columns are named in the same way, etc. So we've tried to make it as standardised as possible. So hopefully there's no surprises in there. And then the final question was, will the ESO have to produce one of these as well? So, oh God, I can't see that now. Yes, so it is quite likely that they will have to publish these bits of information in the future, but we're also working with the ESO to understand some more of their information, so how we can share this better as well. If we nip on to the next slide, and then we're going to open things up to some questions from you all. So this is my chance to ask something of you. So as we're collating this, then as I said before, we recognise that a lot of the information may be out of date or may no longer be representative of you or the assets that you look after. So what I would ask is that if you do have a look at it, if you could review any of the information that pertains to yourself or your assets, then that would be incredibly helpful, and to let us know if your asset is being misrepresented. So if it has changed hands, if you had a new generator installed or a new model, it's just to make sure that within our databases we know what we have connected and where. As I mentioned before, not only does this have implications in terms of contracts and billing, but also in terms of network operation, as this will be feeding our network management system. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we don't end up, disconnecting you for any reason that you shouldn't be, or there's no complications on the network because we don't know what's connected there properly. And a final bit is also tell us if you no longer require accepted connection. So once you have a look at the register, there are quite a lot of schemes that are marked as accepted, but have been for a number of years. So we understand that, often things have changed, or certainly in current times, lots of things seem to have stagnated. But if you don't require a connection anymore, it's still marked as accepted, we would appreciate if you could get in touch with us so that we could close it down, because these do reserve capacity in those areas. So someone else may be wanting to connect on but can't because that is being reserved there. So just as you would not want to have to pay reinforcement to connect to another part of the network if there was something being held in one place, we do encourage you to be gracious if you don't need it anymore. But we're also open for any further questions as well. So has anyone got any questions relating to the information and how it fits into our kind of wider planning and operation within Electricity North West?
Okay, so whilst people are typing, obviously if you raise your hand as well, I'll keep an eye on that and come to you as soon as we can. In terms of the questions that have been received on the chat so far, I think we've answered the first question, which was, does the new embedded capacity register have a standard format across all DNOs? I think you answered that on the FAQ, saying yes, they all have the same format.
Yeah.
The next question we've received is, are we planning to include MPANs?
Yes, so MPANs are available on the current version now. So I think on the example that I showed you, it was accepted to connect schemes were at the top. So they don't have MPANs at the moment because they've not yet connected. So for all connected schemes where it's not owned by a private individual and therefore subject to GDPR regulations, we have included MPANs. There's also X and Y coordinates as well.
So we have another question. Is it ENWL's responsibility to collect this information, or do end users have an obligation to update?
It's a bit of a mixed bag, to be honest. So We are required to collect this information at the point of connection. So as you go through a connection application, then we will use the information that is provided by yourselves in order to fill in all those details. So we have that obligation to collect in the first instance, but if anything changes, then the terms of your connection agreement state that you are required to update us so that we know who is the owner, so that we can get in contact with anyone in terms of billing, contracted capacities, and in terms of safety and operation as well. So we essentially, all of the information would be provided by the connectee, whether that be at the point of connection, as they're making that application, or if anything changes post-energisation. So we have the obligation to publish it, but in terms of notifying us if anything has changed, if anything is different, then that obligation does sit with the connected customer.
It's also worth saying that there are bits of information in that register that we perhaps don't have on existing connections, and over time we will be contacting people and looking to get that information updated if at all possible. So that will be a longer term view to get that information collected, because there's quite a bit of that.
Yeah, just reflect how application forms and stuff have expanded over the years, and so now there's more columns than there once were. So some information, we, especially if it's related to a connection back from the year 2000, and we simply wouldn't have collected that information at that time. So we do have some work to do in retrospectively going back to fill them in. In response to Jay, some information about local flexibility contracts. We've got a flexible services section on our website. So it's underneath the zero carbon header, and there's plenty of information in there, kind of basic information. We've got a flexibility map. You can sign up to our distribution list, view all of our processes and methodologies, etc. in there.
So in terms of the things we've covered today, we also have a number of related consultations and webinars that we've hosted recently. So this slide just gives some details of any consultations and when the deadline to respond is. So we've recently hosted a webinar on our DSO strategy and our grid digitalisation and data strategy. There is an Ofgem consultation open until the 9th of September. So if you are interested in having a look at those, if you click on the link, you'll be able to get through to some further information on that. In addition, we are planning another webinar on network information, which will go into a little bit more depth on a number of the things we've touched on here today. At the moment, we don't have a firm date for that, but it will be in the next couple of months or so, and we will be advertising it. So if you're interested in getting notification for that, just let us know, either through the chat, or if you want to send a note to the ICE mailbox, which is ice@enwl.co.uk, or sign up to our distribution list and you will be notified. Okay, so I shall just check. I don't think we've had any more questions on the chat, and I can't see any hands up, so in which case I think we will draw the webinar to a close. So thank you ever so much for joining. We will stay on the webinar for a few minutes longer if you wanted to ask a question privately, or to touch base with either Lois or Ian for any sort of specific questioning. But if we're finished, then you're welcome to leave, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you very much.